All right, Andy, you want to start? Cool. So welcome everyone to Office Hours. In this one, we are going to walk everyone through the new broadcast functionality from Luma Health. We have three guests on our panel today. We have Angie, who's from Luma Health's product team. We've got Kashif, who's from Luma Health's customer success team. And we also have a guest panelist, Honor, from MPCA. Angie, you want to take it ahead?
Sure. I'll just walk through our quick agenda then. So we'll do a quick overview and then of how all these changes have been made, what new changes we've made, the why we did this in the first place. Then we'll also walk through our roadmap, things that are coming up. Might not be coming up today or tomorrow, but things that are top of mind for us on what to work on next. And then we'll loosen Kashif to do our demo. We'll go through how this works, what it's going to look like in your web app, and then go through our customer spotlight with Honor, who's been a part of our beta program and has lots of great feedback and experience to share with everyone. And then lastly, we'll go through questions. So if you have questions during the presentation, please fill up the chat. We'll go through all of them at the end. And if you have questions in between, just continue to put them in the chat. If we can get to them during the demo, we will. If not, we'll just follow up afterwards. So I'll just get started here. The main why. Big reason, of course, was to improve ease of use. A lot of our old versions of broadcast had things that were hard coded in. So you didn't have a lot of customization capabilities. You had to hard code your files, map things according to Luma. A big quote that we've had in the past is like, instead of having to bend your workflows to match Luma, now Luma's bending to match your workflows. So the files that you've been uploading in the past, we want to be able to customize your outreach accordingly. Of course, create more strategic and robust messaging. In this last year, a lot more email campaigns have gone out, a lot more patient updates that we wanted to be more targeted with how we're communicating with our patients. Of course, adding new configs in the last year as well. Everyone's use cases were different. A lot of new things came up, but now things are starting to get back to quote unquote normal in certain areas. And some of those use cases are no longer applying. So how can we make these configurations easy to use for every new case and everything else that you've done in the past? Better error handling. We want to let you know if something goes wrong, but also let you know when something goes right. Did you know the broadcast went successfully? Who did it go out to? How many people did it go out to? Do you have some extra work to do on one area because maybe the data that we got from your EHR was incorrect? And lastly, just adding information density everywhere, keeping you in the loop, making sure you have all the information that you need to have a successful broadcast and manage them pre and after. So I'll start with the main summary view. A big change that we made was this new table here on the broadcast summary. Previously, the top field had the pending broadcasts, all things that are scheduled or pending, maybe that failed, anything that hasn't been sent yet. And then there was a second bar at the bottom that showed all of your sent broadcasts, but it didn't have all this level of information. We're now including like the sender and the approver, depending on your workflow. Maybe all of your broadcasts go through approval through an admin or a manager. And we also want to show you the deliverability rate. So once a broadcast is sent, we want to let you know how many of those were actually sent successfully versus not. Maybe some patients had missing contact information in the file or other missing fields that didn't have all the information we needed to send it successfully. Maybe their phone number was dead. Maybe they were marked as do not contact, but at least it gives you at first glance if it needs to be actioned even further or not. And then on the right side here is when you go to send a broadcast. So before, these blocks were a lot bigger with all of these use cases built in, but now we know no two clinics are running the same use cases and the reasons why they're sending all of these messages out to their patients. So we simplified this flow. It's still scheduled on one side and then uploaded on the other. And then it's a step-by-step kind of 1, 2, 3 flow for the rest of the process. So I'll go through the upload. This was our biggest I'd say problem child in my pod, which I run reminders and patient communication, the uploads. We had issues all the time with just the formatting of the file or how big the file is or where you get the file from. And I feel so sorry for all the pains that we caused with that file formatting in the past. So we wanted to remove all of that altogether. The power is now in your hands. So we still require some level of information. This is just how we understand a patient is a patient. So we need first name, last name, and date of birth. That's our main 3 key identifiers for a patient. And then at least one contact number because we want this broadcast to go out somewhere. It doesn't need to be formatted this way. If first name was named Muffin, doesn't really matter as long as you have that content in there. Patient's first name, last name, date of birth, and then at least one contact number. So once you upload that file in here, great, you go to the next step. So it's validating each step as you go, you're doing things correctly. So now we have this upload mapper. So on the left panel, you'll see the headers from your file. So once you upload your file, we process the first 3 rows of your file just so that you have that information. Maybe your title is muffin and you forgot what it is, you can expand that table and it'll show you the first 3 rows, whatever that header is, and then the name of your header. And then with that header, you now map it to a Luma Health attribute. Instead of us forcing you to put in first name for first name, do whatever you need to, export whatever file you can from your EHR, and then go ahead and map it. And so on the right side column, you'll see these different variations of the attributes. So everything above that horizontal line is a required attribute. Again, first name, last name, date of birth, and at least one contact number. Without those attributes mapped, you won't be able to go to the next step. It'll auto map. If you are still used to the old process with those very specific header names, we'll go ahead and auto map that for you. Also, if you're using the same file over and over again from your EHR and you've done it mapped once, the next time you go ahead and upload your file, we'll go ahead and auto map to the previously mapped headers as well. So you don't have to keep doing it over and over again. But you can see here, there are other attributes down below. We didn't offer this in the past because we couldn't trust what was in the file to be mapped exactly correct. But now that you're doing it yourselves, you can add things like appointment date, appointment type, provider name, and that will essentially become a squiggly variable that you can use later in the flow for your messaging. And then also, if you wanted to unmap an attribute, for example, you only wanted to do emails for this campaign, and in your file you have mobile, home, and everything else. If you just unmap everything and you just map the email, that's all we'll go ahead and process. So we won't process the mobile number or the home phone number. So all those weird backend things that a lot of customers had to do in the past, this flow will support you to do it in your face pretty much on like all the different steps and show you each step of the way that it's going properly. So you'll see here too, like how this turns into a squiggly on the other end. So from here on this attribute list, you'll see things like patient state, postcode, language. There's also this custom attribute here. And this custom attribute you can use for all sorts of things. In the last year, it's mainly been used for like COVID test results, but essentially in your file, you'd have a column per patient that says positive or negative, et cetera. And then if you mapped that to a custom attribute, we'll go ahead on the right side, turn that into a squiggly. So you'll see here a special squiggly just for these test results, just for this broadcast, that will have those results in there and personalize this message. And the custom attribute you can use as many times as you wanted. If you had 5, 6, 10 different attributes that you wanted to use for your specific message, you can go ahead and do so. For right now though, the header will only have to have like one word in there. If you have more than one word in there, it gets a little sticky. And that's something that we're working on actively. But as long as it's one word in that header, it'll process accordingly. And you'll see it on the right side when you get to that end state. Other things here on our final state for the broadcast flow is the edit details. And I'll go through what these overrides mean in a sec, but I just want to highlight all the different stages here first. So we have our broadcast title, same as ever. And then we have our message here. The message too looks same as ever at first glance. We just changed the icons and the flow here, but this is still your default template. So if you don't add any other customizations in, that'll be your default. And then down below, you'll see contact preferences. So we've gone back and forth with how we contact patients based on the uploaded file. Prior to COVID, we were always contacting active patients in Luma and then creating the new patients. But when COVID hit and the pandemic hit really hard, different use cases came up where maybe we wanted to contact every single contact method in their file because it was an urgent message or something that needed to go out. So now we're putting the power in your hands here as well. There's 3 different options here. You can either send to active patient contacts in Luma. That means we identify that that patient exists from your file, and then we'll contact them based on what's already in Luma. If it's a new patient, we don't know who they are yet, we'll go ahead and create them and then use their active contact. Second option is to send it to all patients in the file and all contacts in that file as well. So if we had mobile, email, and voice, this broadcast would go out to all 3 contact values. And then the last option is we go ahead and process all of those contact values, and then we find the best one. So at Luma, we're always prioritizing mobile. Emails are second best option, and then voice is our last. So we'll go ahead and process every contact value in that file and try and find that best one per patient. So SMS, email, and then voice. And then the send now, send later has stayed the same. You can either send the broadcast immediately or send it at a later time. And then I'll walk through what these overrides mean here. And so like with our beta customer, like Honor, a lot of our customers had to learn liquid language in order to make these customizations in the past. So this is essentially like a new version of how those liquid templates used to work. So if you're familiar, I'll walk through that process and then break that down. So this default template here essentially becomes your else statement. If there aren't any other customizations created for this, this is the message that will be sent out for everyone else. But you'll see here for the overrides, you can select a contact method and a message language. So for example, if I put in email as my contact method and Spanish as the message language for this override, all patients with contact method email and their language is Spanish, they would get this message. everyone else will still get that default at the top. And you can create up to 100 overrides. We can expand that if you need to. For right now, we haven't seen any use cases go above that. But again, you can create as many customizations as you like per contact method and language, but then the default will still catch everybody else. If you also have a process I've heard in the past, also during this beta program, was like sending out newsletters, and you might have this HTML code that you use for your newsletters all the time, and you want to send it over email, you can still paste that into the default template here, and it'll work as normal. Nothing has changed there in the process. And then here too, for email, you can now add your own email subject line. That's been a big hurdle for a lot of our customers, especially in this past year when you wanted to change the subject lines to get your patient's attention. Now you can do this per email, per broadcast sent. And then also there's a rich text editor. There was a lot of cases where people were building out their HTML on some free website on the internet and then pasting that into Luma. You don't need to do that anymore. I'm treating this as if it's like a Google Doc editor almost. You can update the formatting, you can add images, emojis, paragraph breaks, hyperlinks, whatever you would normally need to do in your email, and then send that out. You can add your logo if you want. That's been a big use case as well, and that'll be embedded directly in the email itself. Another thing that has come up that isn't in place yet, but if it does and you guys have feedback on that, please throw it in the chat. But we've gotten some feedback as well for attaching files to the broadcast. Right now, the images are embedded in, but if you have use cases for attaching files or images, I'd love to hear them, and that's something that we'd like to work on as well. A couple other steps here, minor changes is like now that we support using your squigglies and your different variables in the uploaded broadcast, we want to prevent you from being able to send a blank broadcast message if your file doesn't include the right information. So I'm just throwing this as an example. If you tried to use the facility name squiggly, but you didn't have your facility's name in the file, that would render it blank, and then the broadcast wouldn't be able to send. So we're always going to be constantly doing some validation along the way. So in your message library, if you create a message with any squiggly, facility name, provider name, patient name, whatever, we have this little alert there that says you'll only be able to use this shortcut if you have that in your file. And then when you go ahead and send your broadcast, so the right panel here, this is the pop-up modal that comes up when you're sending your broadcast. It'll be grayed out if your file didn't include that information. And it's just to make sure that the message that patients are getting is going to go out successfully with everything that you want included in there. So for scheduled patients, not much else has changed besides the flow. Of course, we added the overrides, the email subject lines, and everything else. But instead, we've made the step-by-step flow to stay consistent with the uploaded broadcast. So now instead of your filters and your messaging being on one page, we've split that into two. So on your first step, you're selecting your patients, applying your filters, whatever you need to do. These are all of your scheduled patients and your schedule up to 180 days in the future. Break it down by type, appointment status, and on the right side panel is step 2. Same as the upload, where you go ahead and add a title, message, overrides, and then your settings. This is a big request that came up in the past where when you're sending a broadcast for approvals, we aren't showing you the filters. We're only showing you the message content and then your patient list. But now these filters, the applied patient grouping, will apply throughout the entire flow. So if you're a manager or an admin that's approving broadcasts, you can validate that the filters are correct and the patient list is actually who you're trying to send that broadcast out to before you go ahead and improve that broadcast. The review changes have been updated only because we have these overrides. We want you to be able to see them in every stage of the process. So if a broadcast failed, if you need to make changes to something that's scheduled for something that has already been sent, you'll always see the overrides, the message content, the settings that were applied. And then on the right side, we're also showing you the deliverability status and the original file. So I've seen a lot of tech support tickets in the past where we're going back and forth with our customers on what the original file was to help troubleshoot or debug. And it's been a big break in us being able to help and support getting this broadcast out. So now the original file will live with that broadcast throughout the whole process. No more going back and forth there. And then you'll also be able to download your success and failed patients. So for example, if your failed patients were all missing contact values, then you'll know who failed. You can update that file, re-upload that in, or at least have some data on what went out successfully versus not. Additional new features that have come in, we do have a new manager role. So in the past, only admins could approve broadcasts, but now we've created a new intermediate role here for managers where they won't have access to the entire account admin settings, but they will be able to have access to like user management and approving broadcasts, creating message library content, sending free text messages without having all the other admin settings. You can cancel a broadcast in progress. We've tried to improve the upload performance. All the call to action buttons now match the flow. And then there are a bunch of new configurations that have improved these large broadcasts going out over the last year. So we have this option to stagger your messages. So for example, if you're sending a broadcast to 10,000 patients, you might not want that to go out all at once. You can now stagger these things to maybe say 500 messages per hour, especially if you're asking patients to call you back or book an appointment. You may want to break that out so that it'll go out over the course of a day or 2 days rather than all at once. You can also notify the approvals by role, group, or account. Before it went out to all admins in the entire group. Now you can say, for this location, I only want it to go out to the managers for this location, or I want it to go out to all the managers at my facility. You can break that down however you see fit for your workflow. And then also contact values are not required if that patient already exists. One more thing that's missing on this list that went out this morning is also settings for notifications. So if you wanted to get emails for if a broadcast failed or went out successfully, you can also set that up in your account. Lastly, we have our broadcast roadmap that's coming up. We want our HTML renderer for emails. Right now we have that rich text editor in, but now we want the backwards flow. So if you are copy and pasting from some other format that you have that you guys are using internally, we want you to be able to paste that into Luma and verify that what that's going to look like within a Luma email, how that's going to render on the patient side. Adding the settings and all the configurations to our new mission control, which is going out later this month. Sorting and organization of the message library has been a huge request. So we're working on the design right now and how you can filter, manage, maybe favorite things as well in the hub or in broadcast. File mapping templates, this actually came up from our betas. How can we store different versions of your mapping depending on different files that you might have had? Reporting, of course. And then lastly, our big ticket item, which is like automations and campaigns, which may or may not be related to broadcast, but the use cases overlap a lot of the time, but it'll contain more robust filtering and patient cohorting, like all female patients over the age of 60 that have diabetes and haven't been seen in the last year. That's the direction that we'd like to get towards the end of this year. And then cadences and outcome analytics, which we don't have today. Like you can only send one broadcast set and done. What if you wanted to send 5 broadcasts to the same group of patients? If they schedule an appointment, then stop messaging them. Different versions of these different decision trees that we can make. And then of course, analytics for those outcomes. I know there was a lot of information all at once. We'll have a lot of questions to go through, and it'll make a lot more sense once Kashif goes through the demo here and show you what it really looks like in your accounts. So I'll stop sharing and hand off to Kashif.
Thank you so much, Angie. So before I jump into the full demo, I want to show you the sheet that I will be walking through. Can everybody see my screen okay? Good. So you'll see that traditionally, as Angie mentioned, we used to have to map specifically to a specific type of document. What we can do now is alter those headers. And so you'll see some familiar items such as patient first name, patient last name, date of birth, but you'll see some new ones. You'll see facility, facility phone, recall type if someone's using recalls, or you can see diagnoses or modality. These are just examples of some things we can use, and I'll show you how that comes into play in just a second. So if you jump into your Luma portal and we're wanting to send a broadcast, I'm going to start with the uploaded file. You select uploaded file and upload your patient list here. It'll verify that it's been received, and you go to next. So I have gone through some of these before, and some of them are auto-recognized. As you can see, because I titled the column patient last name, it's auto-recognizing that patient last name is one of the attributes I want mapped. Same with date of birth, mobile phone, home phone, and email. Provider here, I'm going to drop down the menu, go down to provider name, and select that. Same thing with all the rest of the attributes that I want mapped. So facility, I can select facility name, facility phone, same. Recall type is a custom header. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and select custom. Same thing with diagnosis and modality. Once I've mapped all these, you'll see these green check marks on the right side. I'm going to click next. You'll have to title your broadcast. And then you'll go down to the actual message and start typing. And so if I wanted to say hi, and then all your squigglies are going to be in the drop-down menu here. So you'll see familiar ones. So if I wanted to select patient first name, and I want to select my facility name, and then my facility phone. These are all very familiar. The ones that might be a little more new to you are items like diagnoses. So let's say you have a new diagnosis of, and you would just come down here, and all diagnoses or modality or any of these custom ones will always be titled with the word upload dot, whatever the header is at that point. Now, as Angie mentioned, at this point, it's very important that any custom headers use only one word in the header. So if you try to put appointment type with a space in between, it will fail when mapping that. That is something that we're working on, and it will hopefully be ironed out, but for the time being, need to ensure that any custom headers have only one word in them. So I would select this, and I can send the message at this point, utilizing all the settings that are already set. Here are the message overrides. So let's say for email, I wanted to not include some of this information. So I would just select for all email patients in English, I want to only utilize patient name and say, please call us at, and then include facility phone. So what this override would do is for SMS and voice patients, it would utilize the message here. For all email patients whose native language is English, it would utilize this override. As Angie mentioned, these are the settings on how to contact the patient specifically, whether you want to reach out to all active patients in Luma Health, utilize all contacts in the spreadsheet. Some patients might have both their email address and their phone number. This would send to all. I want to send to the primary patient contacts. So I want to utilize Luma's hierarchy of going from SMS to email to voice in that order. The timing, again, the cadence, you can either send later or send now. This verifies everything that I put in. And here's the output, this very top one. It shows you the time, the sender, the number delivered, and the number undelivered. This data will always be here. You can view in more detail if you want to go back at any point, and it shows you the same information. I'm going to go back now and show you the flow if you're sending a broadcast to scheduled patients. It's very similar to before. You can see that all the filters are here. So if I wanted to select a specific date range, let's say after the 30th, it'll filter my patients down by that. Same with all of the rest of the filters, appointment status, just as before. If I want to go with confirmed only, it'll filter the patients that way. Once I select my patient population, I go to next. The process is very similar. You'll do the title. You can go to your library if you want to utilize previously held messages. And again, as Angie mentioned, if there is something that doesn't match to the squigglies that you have in your uploaded document, it will not be available for you to select. So this appointment reschedule does match the squigglies I have available in this sheet. I could select that. The same message overrides could be applied. And just as before, it'll process the broadcast. There was one patient in that population, so it'll send there. I hope that that was a quick overview. If you want more information or you want to view this again, please reach out to your CSM. We will be more than happy to walk you through it again. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Andrilla to go over some more information.
I'm actually, sorry, Andrilla, I'm going to jump right in. There were a lot of questions. There's lots of questions in the chat, which is awesome. Some of them are quite related to like the workflow. So I just want to go through them really quickly so we don't lose traction there. Other ones are a little bit more high level, but some of these are very specific to the flow. So I'm going to start with Lynn's on multiple facilities. So yes, you can send multiple facilities in the same broadcast. As long as you have the facility names in the file, you can then customize based on the squiggly. So that little bracket variables that said facility name, that'll autofill with that patient's facility once that message is sent. The HIPAA risk to include PHI, yes, it is, but that means that you don't want to include it in certain scenarios. There's a lock icon to make that message a secure message. So you have the patient's name or diagnosis or test results in there. You want to make sure that that's a secure message that will go, hey, you have a secure message from your care team. Please click here and reply. patient will click on a link, they'll log in with their first name, last name, and date of birth, and then get access to that message. It won't be sent directly to their cell phone. If it's a generic message, your provider's going to go be out today, there's weather issues, go ahead and send that directly as a text message. For appointment reminders, I have a start date and time in my column file. Will this be assigned to one squiggly? That depends on what you want to get out in the broadcast. Since appointment reminders typically have a duration for that appointment, a start and end time, that's how that works there. But for us, we just use the start time for our broadcast today. If you needed the end time for a different scenario, please let us know, let your CSM know, and then we'll throw that in as a feature request and understand that use case a little bit more. And this next one, will Luma automatically send to email, SMS, and then primary phone if primary contact is chosen? So it depends on your process and depends on the settings that you select. So if in your file you have SMS, email, primary phone, everything in there, you can choose to send to the primary contact in there. But again, Luma detects that as SMS, email, and then voice. It may not be the same in your EHR. That's how Luma Health processes it. It might be the active contact that's in Luma. That may be the one that's in your EHR or not, depends on your workflow. And then the third is to send it to everything. That said, if you have like a primary contact column or variable in your EHR, and that's directly what you want Luma to send to, then only map that one primary phone to whatever contact value that you want. Doesn't really matter because Luma Health is going to head and process that. So if in the primary contact column, it has certain patients have SMS, certain patients have email, it doesn't really matter. Luma Health will go through and process all of them and email them, send them a text message accordingly, whatever their contact value is. We'll even check their carrier network, whether it's a landline or a mobile phone. We do all of these checks and balances before that message goes out. Another one here is, you've shown that we can set email, text, or voice to send in a different language. Are we able to set the broadcast up to send based on the contact language entered in the file? Yes, that's exactly how that would work if you aren't using the active contact in Luma. So if you use the typical ISO codes for your patient contact language, and then whatever contact value that you have in there, when you go ahead and set your settings for that, you want to send to the active contacts in the file itself. Then we'll go ahead and process their language and their file. It will likely update that patient's language as well, because the file is now our source of truth. It's our most updated information. If that is a problem, again, please let your CSM know or throw it in the chat, and then I'll type that down for notes for later, and then I'll reach out to you to get more understanding on that use case. Uploaded files don't get saved for future use. That said, there is a flow for sending the broadcast again to the same group of patients. So it essentially uses the file again, but it doesn't save in some other universe where you can just grab and go. It would be, hey, I sent this broadcast yesterday to this group of patients. Do I want to send another broadcast to that same group? Couple other, I think there's a last question. If my file named reminders 624, will tomorrow's file be able to reuse the same template? Yes, same as that previous answer. You just resend to that same group. All the mapping, all that patient group will remain the same. Talk about matching and identifiers when uploading. It's the same process across all of Luma. We match patients based on their first name, last name, date of birth, and then at least one contact value. That said, if in your file you want to be even more specific, if you create your file using your patient ID, your external ID. If it's an ECW, it might be your patient ID number. Different EHRs have different namings for that, but that's the identifier that we use on the EHR and on the Luma side. We'll go ahead and map them exactly correct with that patient ID that's in your EHR and what's in Luma. And then last question before we jump into our customer spotlight. Since we can send the contact language in the file, do we still have to set up the script to overrides to ensure the message is translated appropriately? Yes, because the broadcast is a default template that goes out to everybody. You'd need to create the overrides because we're not automatically translating these texts for you. As we all experienced, Google Translate is not great in any language. And so you would still need to tell Luma what message you want to send to your Spanish patients, to your Vietnamese patients. That said, we're giving you the tools to be able to break that out. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. We're going to jump into our customer spotlight, and then we'll jump back into questions afterwards. All right, let me share my screen again. Here we go. All right, we're really excited for this. We have our beta customer here and a massive customer with MPCA. I'm going to introduce Honor here if you want to do a quick intro.
Thanks, Angie. I'm Honor Childress, and I work as a consultant to the Michigan Primary Care Association, where I offer support to over 20 separate health centers who are all at various phases of implementation.
Cool. And you've been in our beta program for about 2 months now. Big issues with like file mappings and file uploads in the past. So like one major question I have for you before or after V2 has gone out, like what are your main use cases and how your clinic is using broadcasts and how it's improved inefficiencies that you might have had before?
So some of our users are using broadcasts regularly and they're beginning to look at more targeted approaches. Others are just sending out their first broadcast. And we have a variety of use cases within our network. We've used it for all manner of COVID-related messaging, from exposures to vaccine availability to test results. We've also used the functionality to send messages related to increasing access to care, closing gaps in care for selected focus measures like breast cancer screenings, and completing health risk assessments. We have found that the broadcast messaging helps us reach large groups of patients using minimal staff time, which is always our goal.
Awesome. So many wonderful use cases sprinkled in that one explanation. And then as a beta customer for V2, could you share experiences of how things have changed from like V1 to V2?
Sure. A lot of our frustration came from our message library. We created a library of template messages for our health centers to pull from, and they had squigglies. And before V2, we weren't able to pull those messages with squigglies in, even if the files we were uploading contained that information. So I really love now the ease of incorporating whatever information you have in your uploaded file. That's our primary use case, is uploaded files into the broadcast messages. Our staff spent a lot of time troubleshooting errors with formatting those CSV files before. So now this is just a huge time saver for us. I also really like the message override functionality, where you can create those separate formats for voice or email messages. We do have a lot of use cases for sending email messages, particularly to patients that have been assigned to us by health plans, but we have not seen those patients yet. We like to message them via email. So we can do that all now in one broadcast, and that is really great. Then we also do have different languages. So the message override that is there now for sending in separate languages is a lot better than the liquid language that we had to use previously.
It's amazing that you learned liquid to use broadcast, but now we don't have to. Question though on your workflow. You had mentioned you set up a lot of message library content. Do you normally manage that? Do the admins do it and it's like set it and go for all the users going forward, or who handles most of the setup?
So our goal is to have all of our health centers have those message libraries loaded in their own message library directly, and just to be able to pull that right in as they're processing the message. To date, I've been doing a lot of support with helping people figure that out, but that's our goal, to have everyone just have it loaded in there and just make it easy as can be. And now that you can search, previously we were having trouble searching through the message library for the appropriate messages because of the squiggly limitation. So that problem is gone for us now too.
Got it. And then do you have any examples of how you might have used broadcast V2 recently, and like what was your team and patient's response?
Yeah, sure. I have several health centers who have used the message library to send broadcasts for pediatric immunizations or breast cancer screenings that are overdue. And the patient response has just been great. Our health centers are, it's kind of spreading amongst health centers that patients are actually responding to these messages, and you can hit a huge group at once. And this is just really helping our health centers get a lot of these obligations to contact these patients and get them in for care that they're overdue for off of their to-do lists. So yeah, it's been great.
And last question, and if anyone else has any questions for Honor or anything else, throw them into the chat. But Honor, do you find that your patients are more responsive when you include personal information for them, like their facility or their provider name, which maybe you weren't able to do in the past with uploads?
We have found that to be the case. However, I would say the majority of our messages have gone out as very, very generic messages, and those have been we've had a very positive response from both. So I'm always a fan of including more information and sending it as an encrypted message, but I think we've seen success with both pathways. So I think you can't go wrong with these messages.
That's awesome. Does anyone have any other questions for Honor? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anna, and also thank you so much for being a part of our beta program to really get this over the finish line.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes. And I know there are tons of questions, so let's go through the rest of these questions that are in the chat. I'm going to start at the top this time because I know I skipped over a bunch of them earlier, but let's go through these. All right, so this first one here is, can you see how many of them were actually opened by the intended receiver? For email, we do this in the message activity. So we have a new dashboard in Luma, which is like messaging activity, which basically tracks all messages in and out, inbound and outbound from patients and to patients based on the service, broadcast, appointment reminders, whatever. So for emails, you will see whether they're sent or opened or received. That said, for text messaging, that's up to the patient. Even for you and me, if you were to text me, I don't have my read receipts on, so you would have no idea I read it. It's the same process for our patients. It's a privacy issue. We can't actually see that. But we do have whether it was delivered or not. And I would say for most patients, if it's delivered, we've all seen it within the first 5 minutes of getting it on our watch or our phone or our laptop somewhere. How often does Luma update our patient roster? We update this based on our normal sync schedule. So again, we sync patients up to 7 days ahead in your schedule every 15 minutes. We sync up to 180 days in your schedule multiple times a day and everything in between throughout that cycle. That said, our patients also update based on events and times. So if they have an appointment scheduled, an appointment updated, a recall updated, we'll update their contact information, their demographics, every checkpoint that we get. That might be after their visit today at midnight. It might be tomorrow morning. It might be 2 days before their visit. But we're trying to catch them as many times as possible on top of those routine syncs to make sure we're always contacting the right contact number, the right information that we have in there, because that's the most important reason why we do all of this. Get patients the information that they need to get the care that they need with you. And then how do we determine if the broadcast recipient was a new patient? I mean, we wouldn't know that. We're just automatically processing these patients for you. If they exist in Luma, we go ahead and match them. If we can't find them in Luma, we query everything in milliseconds all day long. So when you're uploading this patient list, in the background, we're running through this entire list, running through every existing patient in Luma to try and make sure we're not creating a duplicate and we have a match in there. So it seems like magic, it does to me anyway, but in the background, all of that is constantly happening, validating that our information is correct. Our email masks fixed, so we could have the sent address appear with our organization and the domain. So this is included in our white labeling and branding and custom styling for the account. I would reach out to your customer success manager for this, but there's a lot of white labeling that you can do here. Your email domain, other URLs for like your patient app, your logos for patient app. There's a lot to do there. So definitely reach out to them and they'll be able to set this up for you or at least talk you through your options. Let's go through this. This morning when I did this, I didn't see the uploaded file name and when I was in the message. Perhaps I missed this. It's a nice place to double check. So the name of the file, when you do go ahead and upload it for the first time, you'll get that blue banner that Kashif showed you during the demo, and it'll verify that file name. So when you upload that file, you get a blue banner once that upload is complete, and it'll have the file name and the extension, whether it was an Excel or CSV, but please upload a CSV in there, but it'll give you an extra step for validation. And if it's incorrect, you just X out of that little banner and re-upload your file. How exactly do overrides work again? If a message is sent out, it can't be unsent. Am I missing something here? So the overrides and the message being sent are two separate things. So the overrides will happen prior to the message being sent. The overrides just let you customize what message you want to be sent to each patient cohort based on contact and language. A big use case for this is like you may want voice calls to say, call us back instead of putting a link to your website in there or something, or a link to a scheduler. You might, like for SMS and email, you say, click here to reschedule your appointment, but for voice, you might say, call this number to reschedule. So different contact values may have different use cases, and then the languages for each of those as well. When staggering the messages is something that can be done within the account. So right now all of our settings are getting overhauled into this new mission control. And so we're in this limbo state right now, but over the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see that in your accounts. All of our new settings have a lot more user-friendly UI and an experience where you can validate all the configs that are in there. So by then, the staggering of messages will be in the mission control setting board. So you can go in and update. You might want that to be 500 or 200, whatever. And there's one extra step that we're doing there right now. Right now, it's limited to per hour. So you can only do 100 messages per hour or 500 messages per hour. Based on use cases that are coming up, we want to break that down into maybe 10 messages per minute, 30 messages per minute, depending on your workflow of how you want those things to come in or go out. All right, did they make a change so the broadcast doesn't get sent in the same thread as appointment reminders? so that it doesn't block the patient's ability to respond to the appointment reminder. And it all goes into the same stream. I keep hoping this comes. It's causing a lot of issues with us. Our COVID broadcasts and results cover up many appointments that went the day before. I love this question because this is my next project that's coming up next quarter, unrelated to broadcast, but we call this the classic taco burrito problem at Luma. Let's say your friend asks you, let's go out to eat. Do you want tacos or burritos? And you say yes. Your friend is like, so do you want tacos or burritos? You just said yes to something. So same kind of flow in Luma. It's going to be based off of the last message that you sent or received. That said, a project that my pod is working on for next quarter is almost like an appointment confirmation page. So every visit, whether you have multiple appointments in a day, whether you're a parent that has 5 children that are coming in on the same day, we want to make sure that you can manage all of these different appointments uniquely, whether you need to reschedule one of them for the day or you need to reschedule 3 of them, it doesn't really matter. So this is the current state that we're trying to head over to is when you have an appointment, you'll get a reminder that says, please click here for your details or if you want to confirm or cancel. When you open that up, it'll have options to confirm, cancel, reschedule, join a wait list, chat with your staff, whatever features that you want to add on that page, special instructions for their visit, but that at least individualizes each of the events in that patient's account so that if they get a broadcast message in between or their COVID test results in between, it's not going to break the flow for other actions that they need to accomplish just because it's one text conversation. All right, these next questions we went through earlier. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so this says if we cancel patients via broadcast, they will still receive reminder text. Any questions how you can prevent patients from getting conflicting text messages? So we don't actually recommend using your broadcast for appointment reminders, since appointment reminders already are doing that for you. So if there's a special case where maybe you're canceling your appointments due to a provider being out, you want to do that in the EHR first and then send your broadcast out. There is a workflow, though certain customers like it better this way, where you send your broadcast out first and maybe you keep them on your schedule until you actually reschedule them or something like that. This too, please reach out to your CSM or contact me. I'll share my email information afterwards as well if you need some help. That said, there's a flow in the schedule view in your account where you can block reminders for a certain day. So maybe you sent out a broadcast that said, hey, this provider is going to be out, please reschedule your appointment, but it's still living in your EHR. So patients are still going to get reminders. There's a little button on your schedule view that will let you say for this provider, for this day, block all the reminders, and it'll skip everything else that's supposed to be going out for that provider. Let's see.
Angie, do you want to share the broadcast week to go live and release dates? There are a bunch of questions on that.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything. I'm so excited that we have a lot of questions because it means the stuff is interesting, exciting, and ready to go. This has been in rollout over the last 2 weeks already. Our beta kicked off in early April. So if you've been in your Luma account in the last couple of weeks, you would have seen the pop-ups everywhere of when this is starting to come out. So we started to roll out on June 14th. It's going out to general availability today. So if it isn't in your account already, it will be. And there's product walkthroughs all the way in between as well. There are videos, there are one-pagers, help center articles to walk you through the step-by-step process. So if you haven't seen them already, just log into your Luma account. You'll see them all over the place. And then how do we get into beta testing? We'd love to have high use and a lot of enhancements. Oh, I love this as well. Like we are always open to having more beta customers. So if you are interested in being like our first choice list of betas for any beta at all, please reach out to your CSM. I'll let them know today right after this call that they might be getting some inbounds on that and they'll loop you in with our product team and you'll kind of have a product buddy. Each of our pods own different things. Like I own reminders and patient communication. There's also like intake and clinical touch points. We have multiple betas going on at all times. Like right now we have billing and payments, revenue cycle management, we have mission control. So they're happening all the time and we're always happy to have more people join in. So please reach out. We'd be excited for that. Was there any change to the setting of limit the maximum number of feedback surveys we can send to a patient? Okay, so this one here, Steph, I will reach out to you afterwards. Let's just schedule some time offline and then we'll talk through betas and then also some feedback. We'll go through that. Let me write this down so I don't forget. All right, is text required in a broadcast message if you want to send a JPG image containing a newsletter update? No, not necessarily. You could just upload that into the rich text editor. That said, I'm not sure what that will look like on the other end, because in an email, you would drop that in, it would take the whole space. We use HTML for all of our formatting for our emails. There's like a template box, so the sizing might be a little bit off. But if you want to test it first and the sizing is weird for your use case, just open a ticket and then we can work on how to make that work best for your workflow. That totally makes sense to me. All right. Okay, some of these aren't related to broadcast, so I will follow up with you afterwards. Let's see. Okay, and then for automations future projects, that's something we would do internally. So if you're interested in that as well, please let me know. I'm always open to talk more. And then also, if you want to connect with product more as well, just reach out to your CSM and then reach out to support and they'll connect you with a product buddy. And then we can talk through all of your ideas and exciting things that are coming up, broadcast related or not, workflows, issues that you've had. We're more than happy to make ourselves available to hear you out. All right, any other questions on broadcast? I know we've gone way over on this. Andrilla, do you want to jump in?
No, thank you, Angie and Kashiv, and special thanks to Honor for joining us today. It has been a pleasure. I know that there are still questions coming in, but in the interest of time, let us call it a day. And please feel free to reach out to your customer success manager for any further queries that you have. I'm going to follow up on this with an email with the recording and the slides that were shared today, and then we would be also putting that up on our help center for you to use it whenever you need. Thank you, everyone, and hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Honor, for joining us.
Thank you.